that's a thing called a design sprint. It's for those moments where you're a little bit stuck and you need to actually try and do things differently to try and unjam your brain and move in a direction quite quickly. So what I'd like you to do is just to have a look at this particular slide. And I want you to just have a little look at the words underneath Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So mapping and targeting, sketching, deciding, prototyping, and testing. So if you look at the structure of a design sprint, which we're going to look at in more detail now in a moment, a design sprint has all those phases. Now, one other thing I want to explain, the person who came up with the idea of a design sprint was Jake Knapp. And his idea for a design sprint was that it should take 5 days. Now, there is nowhere in the world where you would have the luxury of spending 5 days on a design sprint. It will depend, but I want you to remember that a design sprint can happen in an afternoon, over a couple of hours, if you need to unlock something going on in your innovation. Okay, so you can apply it to anything. You do not need to spend 5 days. So you literally would split whatever time you have, 20, 80%, short spell of time on what's the issue we're trying to fix here, and then you're going to hop into solution space, okay? So keep this in your head as you're going through. So a design sprint is a collapsed idea of lots of different things. So when you get really good at design sprints, they have business strategy, they have sometimes behavior science, they definitely have a bit of design thinking, and they're in a process that's very fast paced and you need to practice it to get really good at it. When you typically use them, when you're under massive pressure in terms of it being high stakes, so you're very close to a deadline and you need to get an answer quickly. If you haven't enough time to do something, you can do a very quick design sprint to finalize or fine tune something, or if you're stuck. And when we looked earlier today on the feelings that you have around where you are in the process, some of you are feeling a little bit stuck. And this process could unlock that for you. This is why we thought it was a good idea to discuss it with you this evening. So typically, according to Jake Knapp, he tells us we have to do it typically up to 5 days, but it can be shorter, as I've just said. When you're doing it, you bring your most diverse team together as fast as you can. You have to be able to crowdsource the best knowledge in relation to your innovation that you possibly can. So you need the best knowledge available to you, whether that's through a desk study or an expert that will come and talk to you. I don't care how you do it, but your shortest phase, the problem phase in design sprints, is critical to actually have that knowledge to your fingertips, okay? You basically have, it's a planned element, short, sharp opportunity, and there are definite goals attached to how you do it and why you are doing it. And you must have a deliverable at the end of the short design sprint and hopefully a validated solution at the end of that. So it's quite short and sharp. People like Jakob use them every day of the week. I know that other people on this call use them a lot as well, but many of you are not aware of these fantastic superpower that is a design sprint. It's very similar in terms of the headspace. The process is a little bit different to design thinking, and then the use of the space that you have for design thinking, it's similar idea. So a design sprint does lean into the same types of mindset, the same curiosity, the same empathy, all of that. That doesn't change. The process is 20-80, 20% in problem space and 80 in solution space. And then you must make sure that to do a design sprint, you're in a creative space. So a typical schedule that I'll have in the deck for you is, if we were following a few days doing this, this is how you would split things up. Ignoring the timing section on the right-hand side, just look at the types of things you've got to do in a sprint. We always start with a group charter. We always assign team roles. And we always choose the issue we're trying to fix. So that problem we're trying to fix. And then we systematically move through the 5 steps. Okay? Map and target, sketch, decide, prototype, test. Okay, 20-80. Keep remembering that. The team roles are critical. So when you pull together a design sprint, you do not want random people around the table. You have very specific people who have knowledge that will help you move quickly. You must have a really good facilitator. Typically, the facilitator is somebody outside your team, if possible, somebody whom the challenge does not really matter to. So if you can find somebody that is really good and can help you do that quickly, they will push you through the process as quickly as possible. You need a timekeeper, interviewer, note taker. You also need somebody who's really good at finance, understanding the finance and budgetary concerns, somebody very good at the technical aspects of it. So choose your team roles dependent on the project, but make sure they are people who are experts in what they're doing. Okay, they need to be the expert on the team sitting in front of you. Sinead has helpfully put this in terms of maybe the types of attitudes and mindsets that you can have during a sprint. You can have people who focus on facts, people who are always thinking of the positive, the yellow hat, people who are always negative. We have people who are naturally like that sometimes, people who are very much about the ideas. And when you switch the hats around the table, if you get stuck during the process, these are Edward de Bono's thinking hats. Really handy to have a troublemaker in the room, somebody who's going to be a bit disruptive. You may tell everybody to be a troublemaker because in a design sprint, you don't want to be safe. You want to take risks. You want to move quickly. As Jakob said earlier, you want to fail fast and often to try and get the right solution. So moving through the different phases, and you will be familiar with these ideas. With map and target, you are familiar with a semantic analysis. That's a skill you can use to figure out what the issue means to everybody around the table. Stakeholder map, you already know how to do that from Paris. You also have the idea of reconnaissance, doing some sort of a desk study, benchmarking exercise, finding that expert input, finding some customer insights. That can be all done from your desk to make this quick, short, sharp for your 20% problem finding, okay? In terms of the narrow part of the actual process for the design sprint, you must always end up in your problem space with a sharp point of view on the issue. That's the point of going into your actual solution space. So you need to have that short, sharp, I know what this is about. We have our insights. Now we're going to hop into our 80% solution space. In terms of the sketch part of it, which is now the first part of your solution space, sketching is a really good idea. I didn't see anybody actually doing it when we were on our earlier exercise, but it's a very handy way to get the ideas down quickly. There's one idea that you didn't try in Paris, and that is 8 by 8. So 8 sketches in 8 minutes on one piece of paper. So each person has 8 Post-its. You set the timer, and they literally draw all of the ideas that are coming to them in that phase. This is what it looks like for each person. You then put them onto a board and you move into decision mode. And you're familiar with power dotting, which is the other thing you learned in Paris. Everybody has these power dots or votes, and you're able to select portions of ideas on those 8 by 8s or full ideas that are on those 8 by 8s. And that can help you to try and decide which ones should go forward into the next phase. You can then decide to move to your prototyping, which is a combination of those power dotted ideas, those ideas that surfaced through that conversation. And in that power type or prototyping phase, you can decide to do a low fidelity storyboard. You can resketch the whole thing again. It really doesn't matter as long as that idea is coherent and easy to understand as you move through it. I would use this particular method of prioritization to help you with that prototype. We call it the Moscow method because it's about must-have, the basic minimum viable process or product. So that's your first line of design. The next line is things that they're not totally necessary, but we could add them. The next line is if we had a lot of money, we might add them. And the fourth line is those features that would be lovely to have if we'd lots and lots of money. So in other words, with the Moscow method, it's giving your MVP in line 1, and every add-on in the other lines is giving you additional value, but is dependent on whether money is available to you or not, okay? And then the next part of it, which is the final part, is testing it. You've got to test the prototype that you actually came up with. I introduced you to this concept of exploration maps in Paris. Again, that's trying to encourage whatever novelty or novelty level you want to reach, that I'm pushing you in a design sprint to really, really go for it, and not to stay in the comfort zone with your idea. So whatever you come up with in the sprint, whatever you're trying to solve in the sprint, you're going to go into either stretch zone, risk zone, or even, if you're really crazy, go into the dark zone. When you start moving along that zone continuum, you're getting closer to new behaviors being required. So how brave are you going to be around your innovation, okay? Depending on the issue you're trying to solve. So I suppose moving to the reflection on that, the basic messages that I want you to remember. You were in Paris, you learned all of these fantastic skills. You used a design thinking process. In design thinking, you spent 80% of your time figuring your problem, 20% of your time figuring out the solution. Today, we're putting another methodology on the table. It's called a design sprint developed by Jake Knapp. That particular methodology is the reverse of design thinking, albeit it uses some of its methods. It is 20-80, 20% in problem space where you have an issue you want to solve. You still do your mapping, etc., to figure out what it is. Then you move swiftly into your 80% solution space, and you sketch, you decide, you prototype, and you test. So you have a lot of the skills already. We're just asking you to perhaps use them in a different way as you move through this.
You're often uncovering things by asking more questions and often investigating ideas that maybe you wouldn't think were necessarily relevant. So that's also an important part of the information gathering as well.
And it's highly focused. This is really focusing on one aspect and sprinting on it. And you can do many of them. You can do one and end up in a particular spot and say, okay, love that. We're now going to do another one. We're going to do a bit more reconnaissance, and we're going to go at it again from another angle. So sprints are something really useful to have in your back pocket to try and disrupt you and get you on the road again.